It started the day I moved into the Victorian house on Ashwood Lane. Everyone in town called it the Old Hollow, but the real warning wasn't its age or creaking floors. It was the walls. They whispered. I didn't notice it at first. You think it's just the house settling, the wind through the cracks. But by nightfall I realized it wasn't the wind. It was something else. Something that knew my name. I should have walked away then. But curiosity has a way of chaining people to their own nightmares. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not the usual musty odor of old houses, but something heavier, like wet earth and iron. I parked my car on the gravel driveway, the tires crunching loudly, echoing against the tall, overgrown hedges. The house rose in front of me, tall and shadowed, with pointed gables that seemed to pierce the gray afternoon sky. I had inherited the house from my great-aunt Eleanor, a woman I barely knew who had lived alone for decades. Her will was brief. To my nephew, you are now the keeper of my home. Treated kindly. Treated kindly. The words echoed in my mind as I pushed open the heavy oak door. The hinges groaned like a warning. The interior was worse than I expected. Peeling wallpaper, dark stains on the ceiling, dust thick enough to write your name in. But what really caught my attention were the walls themselves. They weren't smooth like normal plaster. They were uneven, almost alive, with subtle waves, as if the house had been breathing for decades. I set my bags down and wandered through the rooms, noting the remnants of my aunt's life. Stacks of old letters, faded photographs, broken furniture. And then I heard it. A faint whisper. At first I thought it was the wind, but it was distinct. 2 syllables, soft but deliberate. Lee. I froze. My name is Liam. The whisper came again, from somewhere inside the walls. I ran my fingers along the paneling, but there was no hollow, no secret passage. Nothing but the cold, rough wood. By nightfall, the whispers had grown. I could hear them in every room, sometimes urgent, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying, and always my name. Sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt them watching. And then, at exactly 3:07 a.m., I heard it. A voice, clear this time, right next to my ear. Don't look. I sat up in bed, heart hammering, eyes scanning the darkness. The shadows in the corners seemed to stretch, shifting, waiting. I pulled the blankets over my head, hoping it was just a dream. But the voice repeated louder, insistent. Don't look, or they'll see you. By morning, the house felt different, heavier, like it had settled even more around me, trapping me inside. And I knew deep down that leaving wouldn't be easy. Not yet. The first night alone in the house was worse than I imagined. I had set up my bed in the master bedroom, trying to convince myself that the whispers were just my imagination. But deep down, I knew they weren't. I lay awake, listening. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like footsteps. Every groan of the house sounded like a sigh, or a warning. By 1 a.m., the whispering had started again. Liam. It was soft, almost like a breeze, coming from the walls themselves. I pressed my ear to the plaster, trying to pinpoint the source. Nothing, but I felt it. Something moving inside the walls. Something alive. I got up and walked the dark hallways with a flashlight, trying to calm myself. That's when I noticed the first anomaly. Scratches on the door frames. Thin, deep lines, like fingernails had carved their way through. I hadn't noticed them during the day, and I certainly hadn't done it myself. The house seemed to respond to my fear. Shadows twisted unnaturally in the corners. The fireplace in the living room, which hadn't been used in decades, flickered to life, casting a weak blue flame that didn't burn anything. I stepped closer. The whispers grew louder. "Don't look." I wanted to run, but my legs felt like they were sinking into the floor. A chill ran down my spine as I realized the voices weren't coming from a single location. They were everywhere. They were inside the walls, inside the floors, inside the ceiling. Then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps above me. My room was on the second floor, and yet the attic creaked as if someone was pacing back and forth. I climbed the stairs slowly, holding the flashlight like a shield. The attic door was slightly ajar, though I was sure I had locked it earlier. I pushed it open. Empty. Nothing but dust, cobwebs, and the faint smell of my great-aunt Eleanor's perfume lingering in the air. But the whispering had stopped. For a moment, silence. Almost too quiet. Then, a sudden bang from the basement. I froze. The basement door was locked. I hadn't touched it since moving in. Yet, the sound of wood slamming against wood echoed through the house. The whispers returned louder, frantic, urgent. "They are awake. They are awake." My hands shook as I grabbed the old iron candlestick on the hall table. I knew I had to see what was happening, even though every instinct screamed to run. As I descended the basement stairs, the air grew colder. My breath formed small clouds in front of me. Shadows danced along the stone walls. The basement was empty, at first glance. Then I saw them, faint figures, translucent, crawling along the walls like living shadows. Their faces were twisted in silent screams, eyes hollow, yet somehow staring straight at me. They didn't move like humans. They slithered, writhing, merging into the walls and floor, like smoke. One of them broke from the group, gliding towards me. I stumbled back, heart pounding. My flashlight flickered, then went out, complete darkness. I heard it again, that voice, clearer this time, right behind me. "You shouldn't be here. Leave, or join us." And then the touch, cold, wet, clawing fingers brushing against my arm, sending shivers down my spine. I screamed, flailing, and ran up the stairs as fast as I could, slamming the basement door behind me. I locked it, twice. I didn't sleep that night, not a wink, and in the darkness, I could still hear them, whispering, waiting. The morning after the basement incident, I barely slept. The whispers hadn't stopped, but I forced myself to leave the room and explore the house in daylight. Sunlight made the walls seem less alive, but I could still feel the weight of something watching me. I decided to dig into the house's history. My great-aunt Eleanor had lived here alone for decades, and the townspeople had always kept their distance. I visited the local library, hoping for old records, newspaper clippings, anything that might explain the darkness lingering in the house. What I found was disturbing. The house had been built in the late 1800s by a man named Cornelius Ashwood, notorious for his obsession with the occult. Locals whispered that he conducted strange rituals, trying to trap spirits within the walls. Many of his workers disappeared, leaving only rumors and fear. But the real shock came when I found a diary belonging to Eleanor herself. The entries were frantic, detailing voices she could hear inside the walls, shadows that moved on their own, and a warning she had carved into her final letter. The house feeds on curiosity. The walls remember everything. Do not look, do not listen too closely. or you will never leave. I closed the diary, heart pounding. It explained everything. The whispers, the shadows, the basement figures. But why had she never left? Why had she invited me to this place in her will? I didn't have long to think. That night the whispers returned with a new intensity. They weren't calling my name anymore. They were speaking in a language I didn't understand. Low chants that vibrated through the walls. I felt the temperature drop sharply. My breath became visible, frost forming on the edges of the old wooden panels. I tried to barricade myself in my room, stacking furniture against the door, but the walls seemed to pulse, as if the house itself was laughing at my futile attempts. Then, the scratching began. Not the usual superficial scratches from part 2, but deep, intentional, like claws digging into stone. It moved closer and closer to my door. I pressed my ear against the door and heard whispers shaping into words I could barely comprehend. Join us. Belong. Panic surged through me. I grabbed the flashlight and flung open the door. The hallway was empty, but the shadows stretched along the walls unnaturally, darker than anything I had ever seen. And then, I saw it. A door I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't on any floor plan. Its wood was old, blackened, and warped, and it seemed to hum with a sinister energy. The whispers drew me to it. Against every instinct screaming inside me, I reached for the knob. The moment my fingers touched the wood, a vision exploded in my mind. The house's history, the rituals, the trapped souls, including Eleanor's. They all stared at me, pleading, warning, tempting. And then the voice, clear, commanding, closer than ever. Enter, or stay forever outside. I stepped back, heart hammering. My flashlight flickered, and I realized I had a choice. One I knew would change my life forever. I didn't have an answer yet, but I knew this. The house wasn't just haunted. It was alive, and it had been waiting for someone like me for over a century. I couldn't stop thinking about the hidden door. Every nerve in my body screamed to run, but I was drawn to it, like a moth to flame. That night, I made my decision. I had to see what lay beyond it. I grabbed my flashlight, the diary, and a small crowbar, just in case. The whispers were louder than ever, now forming a chorus that echoed from every corner of the house. Shadows twisted and writhed, pressing against the walls as if alive. My heart pounded in my chest, every step toward the door, feeling like walking into a storm. The door was heavier than it looked, warped and blackened. With a grunt, I forced it open. The smell hit me first, sulfur, decay, and something else I couldn't place. Then I saw it. A narrow passage descending deep into darkness, lined with stone walls covered in faintly glowing symbols. The whispers became voices. Each step I took echoed, but now they carried a rhythm, a cadence that seemed to pull me further in. I tried to remember Eleanor's warning, but curiosity drowned out fear. As I went deeper, the temperature dropped sharply. My breath hung in the air like smoke. Shapes began to emerge from the darkness. Figures trapped in the walls, their faces twisted in silent screams. They reached out, not with hands, but with shadows, brushing against my arms and legs. I felt cold seep into my bones. Then I saw them, a circle of figures in the center of the cavernous space, pale and translucent. Their eyes locked onto me, pleading, warning, mocking. And there, at the center, was a small altar covered in candles. Symbols like those in the diary were etched into the stone floor, glowing faintly. The voices were deafening now. Join us, belong, stay, forever. I stumbled back, tripping over the uneven stone. The The walls themselves seemed to breathe, pulsing with a heartbeat I could feel in my chest. A figure separated from the circle and floated toward me. Its face was horrifying, half human, half shadow, eyes hollow yet knowing every secret of my life. I raised the crowbar instinctively. The figure hissed, a sound like grinding metal, and lunged. I swung blindly. My hands connected with air, but the creature recoiled, almost amused. The walls shook, the shadows twisting violently, the whispers screaming in a chorus of rage and despair. Panic overtook me. I ran blindly, the passage twisting, turning in ways that defied logic. It felt like the house itself was shifting, reshaping its corridors to trap me. Every doorway I tried led back to the same central chamber. The altar's candles flickered violently, casting dancing shadows that stretched along the walls. And then I realized they weren't shadows. They were hands, clawing out of the stone, reaching for me, for life, for soul. I fell to the ground, gasping, trying to crawl backward. The figure loomed over me, whispering my name, its mouth opening impossibly wide. The air was thick, each breath a struggle. I closed my eyes and screamed, expecting the end. But nothing happened. I opened my eyes slowly. The figure was gone. The chamber was empty. The whispers had stopped. Silence. For a moment I thought I had survived. I thought I had escaped. Then the walls groaned, and a whisper, soft and chilling, echoed in my mind. You've seen too much. Now you belong. I scrambled to my feet, every muscle trembling. The passage behind the altar seemed endless, dark, and alive. My flashlight flickered, the batteries threatening to die, leaving me in total darkness. Every instinct screamed to run, but my mind kept replaying the whisper's final words. You've seen too much. Now you belong. I backed toward the central chamber, but the walls began to close in subtly, like the house itself was corralling me. Panic surged. My only chance was the staircase leading back to the first floor. I ran, hearing whispers chasing me, echoing through the stone. Suddenly I felt a cold grip around my ankle. I fell hard, twisting painfully, my flashlight rolling away. I looked down. One of the shadowy figures from the circle had risen from the floor, a mass of writhing darkness. Its hollow eyes stared into mine, and I felt its intent, pure hunger, pure longing, trying to pull me into the walls. I kicked and struggled, managing to break free, and scrambled up the stairs, heart hammering, lungs burning. The house screamed, groaning, creaking, shaking violently. I could hear the whispers screaming in unison. Stay, stay, stay. I reached the front door and slammed it open. Cold night air hit me like a wall, carrying the faint scent of sulfur and decay. I ran across the gravel driveway, my shoes crunching loudly against the stones, not daring to look back. When I finally reached the road, I collapsed, gasping. The house stood silently behind me, dark and imposing, as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. I had survived, for now. Over the next days I couldn't sleep. Every creak, every shadow reminded me of the house. The whispers never fully left. At night I'd hear faint calls of my name, subtle, distant, yet unmistakable. I tried to move on, tried to pretend it was just drama, but the house had marked me. I had seen what it was capable of. I had glimpsed the souls trapped within its walls. And deep down, I knew one day it would call me back. Because some houses don't let go. Some houses don't just haunt. You belong to them, whether you want to or not. And Ashwood Lane would wait